She grabbed his sleeve. A maid, stopping a billionaire in his own doorway. "Don't get in that car." He almost laughed. He didn't, because her eyes weren't panicked. They were calm. The kind of calm that only belongs to someone who already knows exactly how this morning ends. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the woman scrubbing their floors had spent 2 years watching all of them. Every lie, every quiet meeting, every arrangement made in rooms they believed were private. She knew about the car. She knew about the tea. She knew about a document signed 6 weeks ago that was designed to make his death look like an accident. And she had 4 pieces of proof. Stay with me. Clara Bennett had one rule: never speak unless what you're about to say actually matters. She carried that rule the way you carry a good cast-iron skillet. Heavy, dependable, never wasted on something small. For 2 years, she had pressed lemons, wiped counters, kept her silence inside one of the most expensive homes in Greenwich, Connecticut. She had watched, listened, waited. This Tuesday morning in October, the waiting was over. The Hale mansion sat on nearly 4 acres off Round Hill Road. Stone columns, iron fencing, a gravel driveway that crunched under expensive tires like the ground itself was keeping score. The maple trees along the fence line had gone full amber. The sky was clear and pale. The kind of morning that makes danger feel impossible. Inside, the kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and slightly burnt toast. Damian was already in his suit by 7:15. Dark charcoal, white shirt. His whole bearing said, "I have somewhere to be." Serena was at the table. She was always at the table. Elegant, unhurried. The kind of woman who poured tea like it was a quiet act of love. She looked up and smiled. "You're going to be wonderful today," she said. He barely glanced up. Serena hadn't always been this cold. Once she believed in being truly chosen, not purchased. But the world taught her early that warmth without power left a woman exposed. So she learned to weaponize softness instead. Clara worked at the far counter, a damp cloth moving across the marble. She wasn't watching Serena. She was watching the gate. The new driver had arrived at 6:58, 12 minutes early. She'd clocked it without turning her head. She noticed the dash cam bracket. Empty. She noticed the driver key and the gate code. Wrong. Tried again. Still wrong. Third attempt. The gate opened. Nobody reacted. Nobody but Clara. And at 6:45, emptying the kitchen trash, she had found a crumpled piece of paper she chose not to throw away. Damian's schedule. Altered. 3 words at the bottom. The curve by the lake. She'd folded it small and slipped it into her pocket. Now Damian picked up his briefcase and moved toward the front hall. Clara set down the cloth. Her heart was hammering. The same sharp feeling she'd had years ago as a paralegal. The first time she pulled a document she wasn't supposed to find. She crossed the floor in 3 steps and reached out before she could argue herself back into silence. She caught his sleeve. He stopped, turned, looked at her the way busy men look at household staff. Polite, present for exactly 1 second. Her voice came out low, even. "Don't get in that car." The room went still. Even the coffee maker stopped its gurgling. Damian Hale blinked. For the first time in perhaps longer than either of them could measure, he truly listened. What Clara whispered next would change both their lives forever, and she had exactly 4 pieces of evidence to prove why he should believe her. He didn't raise his voice, didn't check his watch. He just looked at her. The stripped-down way that happens when shock cuts clean through a man's armor. "My study," he said. "Now." The study smelled like old decisions and older money. Damian closed the door, set his briefcase against the wall, folded his arms. "Start talking." Clara adjusted her wristwatch, fingers pressing the face flat against her wrist. She did it when she was about to say something that cost her something. The driver keyed the gate code wrong twice. He deleted a message off his phone. I caught the screen light through the kitchen door glass before 6 this morning. She placed a creased piece of paper on his desk. Your schedule. Altered. 3 words at the bottom. The curve by the lake. And there's no dash cam on that car. Damian looked at the paper without touching it. What do you want out of this? He asked. I just want you safe. He almost smiled. He sat down. Before Clara was a maid, she had been a paralegal at a firm in White Plains, New York. 3 years reading contracts most people signed without looking. 6 years ago, working late on a Thursday, she had found documents tied to a name she didn't recognize then. Elias Crow. She touched her wristwatch. He used a forged power of attorney to absorb a small manufacturing company out of New Jersey. The owners never knew until it was done. I brought it to the senior partner. A beat. I was let go by Friday. Elias had not been born ruthless. He had been born poor, in a family where hesitation cost everything. He learned before 20 that mercy was a wound someone had once used against his father. He never forgot. They pulled up the estate documents together. It didn't take long. The durable power of attorney had been quietly amended 6 weeks prior. If Damian were ever declared legally incompetent, full authority over Hale Dynamics would transfer directly to Theo. He'd need someone on the inside, Damian said, mostly to himself. Theo had spent his whole life in the shadow of a brother 2 years older and a lifetime ahead. Their father's voice still lived behind his ribs. Damian will take over. You understand that, Theodore? He had nodded every time, and built a quiet, patient rage out of every single one of those nods. Clara placed a USB drive on the desk. I noticed Serena coming into the kitchen after midnight, 3 nights in a row. I installed a small camera above the cabinet trim, a blind corner. She paused. I've been fooled before. Damian plugged in the drive. Gray-toned footage. Time-stamped 12:47 a.m. Serena moved through the dark kitchen with the ease of someone who had done this before. Opened the cabinet above the stove, lifted a glass jar of tea, added something from a folded paper packet, replaced the lid, returned it to the shelf. Then she smiled to herself in the dark, the way people smile when they're certain no one is watching. Damian's hand closed slowly around the arm of his chair. 3 full seconds of silence. That was the moment it became real. Not theft, not a legal maneuver. They wanted him gone. Permanently. She watched Damian absorb the footage and felt something she hadn't expected. Not satisfaction. Pity. He had been surrounded by people for years and had, without knowing it, been utterly alone. She recognized that. She had lived inside that silence herself. I called Anthony last night, Clara said. Damian looked up sharply. And last night, while the house was asleep, Anthony and I switched the 2 cars in the driveway. A creak from the old house settling, October wind through the maples. They still have one more move, Clara said. We're not done yet. What that final move looked like, and how close it came to succeeding, would reveal just how far Elias Crow was truly willing to go. The next morning wore the face of an ordinary one, cool light at the curtains, Serena at the stovetop in her silk robe, warming the kettle with the ease of a woman who believes the hard part is already behind her. You look tired, she said. Sit. I'll pour your tea. Damian sat, wrapped both hands around the mug she placed in front of him. He did not drink it. Clara kept her back to the room, arranging the dish rack. She heard everything, the clink of the spoon. The careful silence of a man performing normalcy when every instinct is screaming otherwise. She kept her eyes on the faucet. Her fingers moved slow and deliberate over the dishes. If she looked up even once, if her shoulders gave anything away, it was over. Damian brought the mug to his lips, pretended to swallow. "Long day ahead," he said, almost bored. Serena touched his hand, fingers light, practiced. The touch of a woman who had learned exactly how much warmth to measure out. Everything is going to be fine, if only she knew what she was really saying. She told herself this was not personal. That was how she survived it. Damian wasn't a man she was betraying. He was a position she was vacating. But in that kitchen, watching him hold the mug she'd prepared, something flickered across her face that she quickly smoothed away. The reflex of a woman who had once wanted to simply love someone. She had chosen differently, and she no longer remembered exactly when. At 7:45, Damian walked to the driveway. The new driver was waiting beside the wrong car, exactly as Clara and Anthony had planned at 2 in the morning. No elaborate scheme, just two cars repositioned in the dark, keys moved, the decoy placed closest to the gate. He climbed in without a second glance, pulled down the drive, turned north. Anthony brought Damian's real car from behind the hedgerow. Damian got in without looking back at the house. They took Route 120 north through light Tuesday traffic. Connecticut countryside on both sides, stone walls, farmhouses. The kind of scenery that makes danger feel like it belongs to other people. Damian watched it without seeing any of it. "How are you holding up?" Anthony asked. "Ask me in an hour." Half a mile behind them, Clara sat in a borrowed car with her phone in her hand, watching, waiting. Her knee was bouncing. She pressed it flat with her palm and made herself breathe. The decoy car crossed into Valhalla, past Kensico Cemetery, turned onto the Reservoir Road. The southern bank of Kensico Reservoir. Clear water. A long, sweeping curve, almost no guardrail. A steep drop to the shoreline below. Beautiful. Quiet on a weekday morning. The driver's hands tightened on the wheel. Then he jerked it. Hard left. Correcting, sharp right. The kind of move investigators later call losing control on the curve. But there was no one in that car who could be hurt. 3 men from a Stamford security firm moved in from the tree line before the driver had taken 4 steps. Over in under 5 minutes. No wreckage, just a man being walked to a dark SUV while birds resumed in the trees as if nothing had happened. The reservoir glittered, still, indifferent, like it had seen worse. Later, across a plain table in a nondescript building outside Valhalla, the driver talked. Elias Crow's instructions had been specific. If Damian survived the crash, if he walked away, if he was conscious, the driver was to make certain Damian did not leave that road, not incapacitated, gone. The man who relayed this information said it flatly, no hesitation, no remorse, as if he were reading a grocery list. That was the part that stayed with Clara longest. Clara was outside when the call came through. She stood still, wind pulling at her uniform, phone pressed flat against her palm. She closed her eyes for one breath, pressed her wristwatch face down, hard. Then she straightened and walked back to the car. She had imagined this moment as relief, a door closing cleanly on pain. Instead, she felt tired, not from sleep deprivation, the tired of carrying something heavy for a very long time. She thought of Renee. She always thought of Renee. She let herself feel it for exactly one breath, then tucked it back down and went back to work. Damian sat alone in a leather chair as the light moved slowly across the floor. He whispered it to the empty room. Maybe I deserve this. Not self-pity, the honest reckoning of a man measuring the distance between who he had been and the people he had never thought to look at. Franklin with his arthritic hands on the rake. Pat folding towels no one noticed. Anthony, steady in every early morning. Clara, in her gray uniform, watching the gate at 6 a.m. He had walked past all of them for years. Not cruelly. That was almost worse. He had walked past them the way you walk past furniture, without malice, without thought, without once wondering what they carried home at the end of the day. It had taken someone willing to grab his sleeve to make him stop. 40 miles south. Elias Crow poured fresh coffee in a glass-walled conference room on the 42nd floor. Unhurried. Certain a difficult problem had been solved. He had no idea what was already riding the elevator up. What was about to walk through those boardroom doors would be the last thing anyone in that room expected. The conference room on the 42nd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, a table long enough to seat 20 with room left over for ambition. Theo Hale stood at the head of it, composed, polished, wearing exactly the right amount of grief. He had practiced this, for years, in ways he would never admit he had been practicing this. Elias Crow sat 3 chairs down, still. 2 attorneys sorted papers with the efficiency of men paid not to ask questions. Serena sat at the far end in a simple black dress, her expression arranged into something resembling sorrow. The room smelled like expensive coffee and fresh printer paper, the small details of a normal Tuesday. Except nothing about this Tuesday was normal. He had not wanted it to come to this. He needed to believe that. What he had wanted was simple: to be seen, once, by a father who only had eyes for one son. But wanting had curdled over 32 years, from longing to resentment to something with its own cold logic. Somewhere along the way, Theo stopped asking if what he wanted was right. He only asked if it was possible. As of this morning, Theo began, voice pitched at precisely the right tremor, my brother Damian was involved in a serious accident, in full accordance with the amended durable power of attorney filed 6 weeks ago. The door opened. Just the quiet click of a latch, the sound of a door opened by someone who has been patient their whole life and has simply decided today is the day. Damian walked in, suit pressed, briefcase in hand. The face of a man who had slept 3 hours and used all 3 of them well. He crossed the room and took his seat at the head of the table. No announcement, no speech, just a man sitting down in his own chair. Theo went pale, his throat moved. His hand dropped to the table and found nothing to hold. Behind Damian, still in the doorway, Clara. Gray uniform, low bun, hands folded. She walked in with the ease of someone who belongs exactly where she is and has never needed a title to prove it. A board member looked up. The maid needs to leave. Clara did not leave. She took 1 step forward instead, calm, unhurried, as if she had not heard him, or had heard him perfectly and simply disagreed. She had heard variations of that sentence her entire adult life. Dressed differently, said differently. Always the same message. This room was not built for you. She had learned not to flinch. Flinching was a luxury. She had work to do. That board member's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced down. Reflex. The screen lit with a message delivered to a thread he hadn't known he was part of. From Elias Crow. It's done. Push the vote through. Hale is no longer a problem. He looked at his phone, looked at Damian. Alive, alert, 10 feet away. Looked at Crow. Crow saw his own message reflected in the man's face before his hand reached his pocket. The room with the kind of quiet that feels like pressure. Clara stepped forward and placed a phone on the conference table. Old, cracked screen, rubber case held on with a rubber band. The kind of phone that looks like it belongs in a kitchen junk drawer. Which was entirely the point. She pressed play. First recording. Elias Crow's voice. Low, unhurried. Never imagining anyone was listening. Discussing the power of attorney with Theo as a timetable. Not if Damian was removed. When? Second recording. Serena's voice in the dark, murmuring the sedation schedule with the ease of someone following a plan she had long since committed to memory. The attorney nearest Serena quietly set down his pen. Nobody spoke. The recording ran for 43 seconds. It felt longer. It felt like a door being held open so everyone could get a clear look at what was on the other side. Then it stopped. In the silence after the recording, something shifted in Crow's face. Not remorse, too late for that. Something colder. The recognition that he had, for the first time in 30 years, been out-observed. He had spent his career looking past people who cleaned rooms and poured tea. He had never considered that one of them might be looking back. The senior board member, a woman in her early 70s who had sat through more crises than anyone else at that table, removed her glasses, folded them on the table, and said, "I believe we have some motions to bring to a vote." Her voice was even, almost gentle. The voice of a woman who had learned long ago that the quieter you spoke in a room like this, the more weight your words carried. Theo stripped of all proxy authority. 4 minutes. Crow's company agreement suspended. 6 minutes. Independent investigation approved. Unanimous. Theo sat motionless. A man who had arrived at the ending of a story he'd spent his whole life writing and found it was someone else's. Crow walked toward the exit. He was met at the door by 2 men with specific questions and considerable time to ask them. Clara slipped her old phone back into her pocket. Several board members watched her do it, recalibrating something they thought they understood about the world. She adjusted her wristwatch. She did not smile. Everything had been exposed. But there was still one truth Damian didn't know. One Clara had carried alone for 2 years. And it was heavier than everything else in that room combined. They drove back to Greenwich in the long gray light of late afternoon. Anthony drove. Clara sat in front, phone face down. Damian watched the window without speaking. The silence between them wasn't comfortable. But it was clean. The kind that follows a storm when you're still figuring out what's left standing. Nobody needed to fill it. That itself was something. When they reached the mansion, Clara was out of the car and back to work before Damian had finished unbuttoning his jacket. He stood in the entryway for a moment, watching her disappear around the corner with a cleaning cloth. Back to the marble counter, back to the dish rack, back to the quiet work that had been her cover, and her truth at the same time. He didn't know what to say, so he said nothing and went upstairs. In the days that followed, the house changed. Not dramatically, the way a room changes after you've moved the furniture. Same objects, different weight. Damian ordered a full audit of Crow's network, brought in outside counsel, made his calls by telephone, individually, by name. He had the kitchen camera removed. He left a handwritten note on Clara's cleaning cart. "Thank you for putting it there." She read it once, folded it, put it in her pocket, went back to work. He found himself doing something he hadn't done in years. Noticing. Franklin's arthritic grip on the rake, the folded towel Pat always left by the sink so the next person didn't have to search. He had walked past these details for years as if they were wallpaper. Now they looked like something else. A life being quietly, faithfully maintained by people he had never once thought to thank. He started saying good morning to people whose names he had learned, then relearned, then finally just knew. It seemed like a small thing. It wasn't. Franklin started leaving Clara a cup of coffee from his thermos on the back step each morning. Pat started saying good morning in a way that expected an answer. Clara gave answers, small ones. Real. Damian noticed. He had taken to sitting at the kitchen island in the evenings. Not working, just sitting. The way a man sits when the noise of his own life has finally gone quiet enough to hear himself think. Some nights he brought a glass of water and didn't drink it. Just sat, staring at the countertop, turning something over in his mind that he didn't yet have language for. The loneliest feeling is not being alone. It is being in a room full of people who look right through you. She had lived inside that feeling for 2 years in this house. She had used it as fuel. Now she wasn't sure what to do with the quiet that had replaced it. One Thursday evening, Clara was finishing the dishes when Damian came in and sat without asking for anything. The dish rack filled slowly. The faucet ran. She didn't turn around. Didn't ask why he was there. She had learned that some people needed a moment to find the door before they could walk through it. After a while, he spoke. The curve by the lake, her hands went still. You warned me from the beginning, he said, all of it, and I almost didn't listen. But you did. She didn't turn around. That's the part that counts. He reached across the counter and took her hand. Not a grand gesture, just the careful reach of a man who knows he owes someone something true and doesn't yet have words large enough. His fingers were cold. She noticed that. The cold of a man who had been carrying something he hadn't fully set down yet. Clara held it for a moment, then drew it back, dried her hands, turned to face him. Do you want to hear the whole truth? Something behind his eyes went still. The stillness of a person who understands the next thing they hear will cost them, and has decided to sit with it anyway. His chin lifted slightly, a breath in, held. Yes, Damian said. Outside, the wind moved through the maples. The porch swing creaked once in the dark. What Clara told him next was not about evidence or boardrooms. It was about a name Damian had never heard, and a life quietly destroyed inside the walls of his own company. Her name was Renee. 24 years old, sharp, careful, the kind of person who noticed things the way Clara did. Though in Renee, it had always seemed like a gift rather than a survival skill. 2 years ago, Renee had been an intern at Hale Dynamics, entry level, no title, the kind of position that makes a person invisible to people who measure importance by the size of an office. She found something in the financial records she wasn't supposed to find. She reported it, internally first, then to outside counsel when the internal response went quiet. Terminated within 3 days. The threats came after. Then a patient, methodical campaign to dismantle her credibility so precisely that by the end, Renee could no longer fully trust her own memory, her own account of events, her own mind. Admitted to a psychiatric facility in White Plains 18 months ago. Still there. Clara said all of it in a voice that didn't crack. I took this job to get close to the records. I came in planning to build a case and destroy all of it. She paused. But over 2 years, I watched how you moved through this house. The way you remembered Anthony's daughter's name. The way you left a cash tip with a note when Pat stayed late. You were not your brother. So I changed my plan. Her hands were flat on the counter. I chose to save you instead. Not because the evidence wasn't there, but because I refused to become what had already taken so much from her. She looked at him directly. I chose to trust you. Don't make me regret it. She had imagined revenge as a door closing cleanly on pain. But sitting there, she understood. Revenge would not give Renee back a single lost day. It would only give Clara a new kind of emptiness. She chose differently. Not for Damian's sake, for her own. Damian sat with that for a long moment. Then he said her name. Renee? Just that, as if saying it was the first real act of acknowledgement. Yes, Clara said. He looked up, not past her, at her, completely. Your sister will receive the best care that can be found, through me, personally. And I will not allow what remains of my family to keep doing what they've done. To yours. To anyone. He had built a life of extraordinary competence and extraordinary blindness simultaneously. The guilt of that was not something a wire transfer could resolve. It was something he would have to learn to carry and let teach him. Something Clara had held down for 2 full years, locked tight as a pressed wristwatch face. Let go. Not in a flood, in a single, slow exhale. Quietly. Privately. Damian noticed the next morning. He was already at the kitchen island when she came in at 6, 2 mugs, her Folgers. Found without being told. A small coffee ring on the marble she'd need to deal with later. He looked up. I thought maybe this time you could sit down. Clara looked at the mugs, at the coffee ring, at him. She sat down. Morning light came through the window, slant, gold, quietly forgiving. The kind that makes an ordinary room look like somewhere you'd choose to be. She was 27. She had walked in carrying a plan built from grief, and walked out having made a harder, stronger choice. Not the choice of someone with nothing to lose, the choice of someone who refused to lose herself. He was 34, and for the first time in a long time, he wasn't looking ahead at the next decision. He was looking at the person across the table. Maybe that was its own kind of beginning. This story reminds us that the person most easily dismissed, the one working quietly in the background, is often the one who sees everything most clearly. And it reminds us of something harder. The people who hurt us most are not always the ones who felt the least. Sometimes they were hurt first, and never found a better way to carry it. Theo wanted to be chosen. Elias was afraid of having nothing. Serena learned to protect herself from people who might leave. None of that made what they did right. But understanding it, sitting with the truth that cruelty rarely comes from nowhere, that is what separates wisdom from simple judgment. Clara didn't save Damian because she was without anger. She saved him because she was strong enough to choose something better than what had been done to her. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one with the most power, it is the one no one thought to look at twice. If you had spent 2 years watching the person who unknowingly benefited from your family's destruction and discovered they were not who you expected, what would you have done? Would you have saved them? Or would you have let the truth fall where it may, and called that justice? Every line in these emotional stories comes from real human insight and lived experience. AI was used only to enhance clarity and pacing, allowing deep lessons about kindness, systemic bias, and personal strength to resonate with a global audience.